Welcome back to another Halloween episode. If you don't know already, we are doing a Halloween special this entire month, with all episodes during the month of October pertaining to the gore, fun, and creepiness of Halloween. Tonight, we are watching and discussing a few Halloween classics, so grab some candy and get ready to listen to our take on Edward Scissorhands and Hocus Pocus versus Hocus Pocus 2. So welcome back, everyone. Happy Halloween. We're finally in to the fall pumpkin spice season now, which I'm super excited about. I hope you are too. So today we're going to start out talking about Hocus Pocus versus Hocus Pocus 2. That's low-key like a little tongue twister, you know? Because that's a lot of Hocus Pocus. Okay, anyways, great. Hocus Pocus 1 is a really great movie, but I want to know your thoughts on what you felt or thought when you heard about a Hocus Pocus 2.
Yeah, so I actually saw advertisements for Hocus Pocus 2, which was really the first time I saw that Hocus Pocus 2 was even coming out. Because I didn't know that they were making a sequel to Hocus Pocus, you know? But I saw advertisements for it probably starting late August, September. And I was like, oh, I gotta see this. Because, when they try to redo classics, I'm always, my eyebrow raises and skepticism because I'm like, oh, gosh, here we go again,
Especially Disney. Disney sometimes does not do well with it.
Yeah, I hate to say it, hopefully I do get to work with Disney one day. But a lot of times they miss on these sequels, okay? Especially when the sequel is 20, 30 years later. Is never living up to the classic usually. So of course I was a little skeptical, but I was like, no, I'm gonna have to watch it because Hocus Pocus is, OGs know Hocus Pocus was really holding it down for the 90s kids, okay? So I was like, I gotta watch Hocus Pocus 2 when it comes out. And that's when I first learned about it, and I watched a trailer and I was like, okay, the trailer didn't disgust me, so I'm gonna watch it. But yeah, what did you?
Yeah, no, that's kind of how I felt too. I saw a trailer on I think I was watching something on Disney Plus, and I was like, what? And so I kind of was like, nah, that's probably a joke or something like that. And then Courtney told me about it, and I was like, whoa, they're for real. So I was like, well, I guess I'll give it a fair shot because I mean, like I said, I wasn't too excited about a Disney sequel because Disney does not always come through. So, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't say I was indifferent, but I was also just a little weary. I don't know.
Yeah. So. I got to give it up to the power of street advertisements because people think that the only kind of advertisement you should be doing is online, but especially where I'm living now, street advertisements for all the shows and stuff, that's a big thing here. So that's how I saw it. The bigger the billboard, I was like,
I think there's also an industry for that there too. So.
Well, yeah, the industry definitely is here, but there's certain streets I'm like, I didn't know that was a thing, and that. And they definitely use the architecture as a way to advertise. And you think it doesn't catch your attention, but when there's an 18-foot image in front of you, you do be like, okay, well, that exists.
Facts, yeah.
So yeah, it was definitely street advertisements that got me to be thinking about Hocus Pocus 2. And then, of course, obviously my familiarity with Hocus Pocus, the first one, I was like, well, I'm going to have to check it out, And normally, like we were saying, sequels, usually you can kind of tell even by the advertisements, whatever. But I think they did a pretty good job putting the whole, PR package together for it. So
yeah, and there's a lot of marketing things. So I've noticed they have a Hocus Pocus makeup palette now that's out, and so there's a lot of things that went into it to prepare.
Yes, so. Bro, I was this close yesterday. I didn't need to spend any more money, but I was in Ulta yesterday, and I saw the Hocus Pocus palette. I was like, not that really. Disney is like,
Right?
we're gonna get into every corner
Funny. We're
of the
gonna make this
market.
money.
Like, but yeah, I
We're
saw the
gonna
Hocus
make this
Pocus.
money.
Yeah, and they were specifically pushing it for Hocus Pocus too. And I was like, I mean, the colors were actually like pretty good. I was like, if I wasn't already, spending my own money on something else, I was like, this is pretty good for like if you want to go for kind of this like green witchy,
Mm-hmm.
smoky black kind of look. Green. It was kind of like greens, oranges, and purples. It's like sort of stereotypical like witch colors, but
Mm-hmm.
you can really do some cute stuff with it. Like the palette looked pretty good. So
The good thing about green is like you can always make it into an olive.
exactly, yeah, you can go
Run with the
ways with it.
olive.
And for it's it's probably a palette for people who don't do as much special effects makeup. But if you do just kind of like more of a caricature look on your like your kind of like a play on normal makeup, those are really good
Mm-hmm.
colors to play with. So, but yeah, sorry to divert. I just like you said that, and I was like, I literally saw it in the store and was like, this.
I saw it on the ad and I was like, they run out.
Yeah,
They literally run out.
but
But I mean,
maybe.
it is good like marketing. So
Well, thing is, yeah, I was like, I try to be weary of that kind of stuff because sometimes it just be like a little too much.
yeah.
But I looked at the colors because they put it on display. They actually show the open palette and all that stuff. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, that's not honestly, yeah, a little lame, or it's gimmicky. But
Mm-hmm.
if you were looking for that color scheme, that might actually be a good thing to look into.
Facts. Yeah. So it was just like greens and purples.
It was like greens, purples, but they do the different shadings. I think the palette had like, it was probably anywhere from 16 to 20 colors.
Oh, not
But
bad.
sizable. Like, so they have like obviously like a bright orange, a bright green, a bright whatever purple. But
Hmm.
then they have like your dark browns and then like a couple of grays and some shimmers
There's
and
some of
stuff.
your
So
standards in there too.
yeah, some of the standards so you can kind of blend and mix and because like the makeup girlies now, that's a big industry, especially
Oh,
on
for sure.
like lifestyle, Instagram, all that stuff. That stuff we would take nothing for an influencer to get like their paws on that palette and then start making
Facts.
whatever. So
Seriously.
that's why I think they
Huh.
probably tap into it because they were like, there's a big market in the girlies doing makeup. So
Right. Busy trying to make that money.
seriously, now they should do an Edward Scissorhands palette. I'd be down for that.
Yeah, that would be cool. It would be
Mainly,
like pastels though, in black and white.
exactly, but I would be coul with that because like it's
Yeah,
such a contrast like between Edward's look and then the town look. But
true.
I would love to see a like especially the town look because you could wear the town look in the middle of summer.
Very true.
I don't know how you do it, but and then you could also play with that pastel to like a darker color. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry that got off on makeup, but just wanted to say it does exist. They probably have it at Ulta near you now, and this is not paid
Seriously.
advertisement for Disney. But
Okay, so watching the movie, what did you think?
Hocus Pocus 2. So honestly, overall, I'm gonna give like if I had to give it a rating A through F,
Mm-hmm.
I'm giving it like a C plus B.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's not quite A category for me,
Mm-hmm.
so it takes it out. But like, I guess probably like a B. I'm not gonna say quite a C. It's like I guess it'd be like 79, 80 range out of 100. That's what I would say.
Okay, that's fair.
What do you
I think
think?
that's fair. No, I agree. I was gonna say I'll give it like a B. There were certain things about it I was just like, I could really care less about that. Um, or like they really did try to like modernize it, which I mean, I guess I get that premise.
Hmm.
Just because that's what Disney does.
Yeah.
um, so Disney's not going to stray too far from their moneymakers or their norm. And I think also too, like I'm a '90s baby, and so I enjoy those things versus like the modern culture. I'm not really that much of a fan. So they appealed more to that audience for sure, which I get it because it's Disney. So, that was really my only like major critique on it was they definitely added a lot of modern things, modern sayings, modern like just like themes and stuff like that, I guess you could say. So, but overall, I give it a B too. That's fair.
Yeah. I think that's the issue I think Disney runs into a little bit too much is like they're very heavy-handed on the modernizing, which
Oh yeah,
I get bringing it a little bit into the current day, but it just feels like they're like really, really pushing this whole gotta be on Instagram, gotta be taking selfies.
yeah. It's trying
Gotta
to.
be, yeah, it's trying a little too hard. And I think, you know, when you think about the original Hocus Pocus, that was actually the premise even in the 90s was there's these witches from the 1600s who come into the 90s. So there's things they don't know about the 90s, right? Which
Yeah,
obviously the 90s, they didn't have iPhones and Instagram and all this, right? But so it felt a little bit like a repeat. It felt like very unoriginal because they that's what they did in Hocus Pocus 1, right? Because they come out
yeah,
of the book and they're like, "Well, what time is it?" And the kids are like,
yeah,
1993. You know
yeah. It's kind of like a redo. Is really what
exactly.
happened.
Yeah.
They had some like I think I one thing I really liked was in the beginning they kind of did a little backstory into the Sanderson sisters, which I feel
Mhm.
like if they would have did a Hocus Pocus 2 or like something about getting to know the Sanderson sisters, that would have been more interesting to me.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
was
kind of
gonna
like because that little when they took it back, it was cute, it was giving,
say,
but and it's not the new part wasn't that it wasn't giving, but they literally kind of just repeated what happened in the
and the first one,
1991
it's the same
and
premise to
just made
me.
it modern.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. The only real spark of newness, like the strongest point of newness, was actually, ironically enough, going back and further into the past, which was going
Yeah.
back to the 1600s of Salem
Hmm.
and seeing like
Yeah.
little Winnie and the other sisters.
They were so cute. I love that.
Yeah,
That
that
was my
honestly,
favorite part.
they could have made a whole. That was fresh because we'd
Yeah.
never seen the Sanderson sisters before. But
Hmm.
going from that and then jumping not just to 1993, but to 2022, even further into the future, it's like, what else can you really say about the future?
Yeah.
They were lost in 1993. You think they're gonna be found somehow in 2022? Like, like I don't know. I think that honestly, they had me going for a little bit. I was more intrigued in the first 20 minutes of the movie than I was,
Yeah.
unfortunately, in the last 20.
Oh,
So,
100. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, like the last hour and 20. The
yeah.
first, like, when they did the Sanderson sister things, well, that was about 20 minutes. Um, it was cute, but, everything else was just like, oh, okay, like, whatever.
Yeah.
Which I say, like, it wasn't bad. It was just, Disney's really big on, it's almost like live action. Even though back in the day in the 90s it was live action, but it's just like a modern version of that now.
Mm.
So, it's just, yeah.
I think honestly, and that's why we say like Disney, unless you're doing a solid, totally new, very fresh sequel to something or a prequel to something, I think it's not worth tampering with classics. Hocus Pocus is a
Yeah.
classic. You could have cashed in, and you were cashing in on Hocus Pocus from 1993 till now. You would have
Facts.
continued to cash in. I don't think you needed a Hocus Pocus 2 unless it was going to be something distinctly different.
And honestly, I feel like they probably would have been better off. They just would have like, how they like have those movies where they like play them in theaters again,
Yeah. I was like,
like
people go
doing
up for
that. 'Cause
Hocus
people
Pocus.
like Hocus Pocus, and people really enjoy Halloween. Which
Exactly.
I like. As a kid, I kind of could care less. Besides like the candy and stuff like that, or like when we would go with like the other kids and stuff like that. But as an adult, like I like Halloween even more. So
Exactly. I'm like, you could have and now that the people who watched Hocus Pocus as a kid have grown up, you have got nostalgia attached to it as well. So it's even
yeah,
stronger feelings of connection to that film. So
true.
I think it's the wrong move. They're trying to like make it available, I guess, to a quote new generation. But what I think they don't realize too is like young kids will go back and watch the old stuff based off of what they
Yeah,
hear their parents say, based off of what they hear, blah blah blah. You know what I mean? Because
for sure.
it's 22-year-olds who know about Hocus Pocus or know about
Hocus
um
Pocus is a classic. Like who does not
yeah,
know?
even stuff from like the 70s or whatever. It's like people young people don't have a problem going back and looking at the classics. I think that's a big misnomer in our culture, is that young people only like the new fresh. Young people, you see it on TikTok all the time. People use
Oh
sounds
yeah.
that I'm like, that is from such an obscure song from the 70s, and the kids dig it up. And you're like,
Facts.
I think they have this real, they must not be paying attention too much to the culture, because the kids will go back and watch the classic. I
For
think they got
sure.
that very wrong.
Yeah, most people,
The
the
classic
most kids that I know that are older, they would rather deal with the classics than to go and like,
than like watered down new
yeah,
stuff, because
yeah, yeah, yeah,
they
exactly.
know the gimmick is, at that point they know it's a gimmick trying to like get their attention,
Yeah,
and so it
and I
waters it.
think also too that like it was. I mean, now a lot of things are based off of um, a modernized version, and kids know that, and
Exactly.
so or like their parents know that to tell said kids, you know. So it's like
Exactly.
the level. We had an earlier episode this year where we talked about is originality dead, and
Mhm.
it's literally that question, you know. It's especially with this Hocus Pocus because it's they weren't even original about it. The only thing that was literally the only thing that was original was for 20 minutes, and it was explaining the history of the Sanderson sisters.
Exactly, because the two main characters, the two girls who basically took the place of the teenage boy and teenage girl. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
names, but the teenage boy and teenage girl in 1993 version, they were doing the same thing that those kids were doing. They were looking to
Yep.
basically get the Sanderson sisters back into the book, back into the place where they weren't
Yep.
disrupting Salem, weren't disrupting the
Even the
town.
party with the parents.
Yeah, even the party with the parents. I was like, you know, who was in charge of development? Because there is no way that whoever greenlit the project didn't already know what the plot for Hocus Pocus was. I'd be like, if somebody put that script in front of me, I'd be like, what did you even change? And do we need
Seriously.
to actually get on plagiarism? Because it seems like you didn't change anything but names
Anything.
and added a few cell
Looks.
phones. Yeah, some
There's
look.
somebody black in there.
Yeah, or that scene in Walgreens where the witches are walking around Walgreens, which I'm not sure. I feel like there had to be a moment similar to that in
Yeah, I
Hocus
feel
Pocus.
like it
Wasn't there
too.
a moment in Hocus Pocus where they were walking around some store, or they were walking around some like very modern for the 90s type
I don't
place,
think it
and they
was a
were
store, but remember they were like walking just in the street, I think.
yeah, when they were walking in the
And then
street,
like the
and
school bus and stuff.
and they were like, "What is this? What is that? We don't have this,"
Yeah.
and it's like they did that same thing, but they brought them to Walgreens, and it was
Of
like,
all
okay,
places.
yes. Yeah, and Walgreens, represents very Americana, very commercialism, very streamlined,
Yeah.
right? Like that seems like endless products in that store, right? So I get like honestly, I thought that was more of a from an art perspective. I was like, this is feels like much more of a critique than a you know laughing at them, sort of looking through all these like beauty products or whatever. It felt more like somebody was trying to make a statement. I don't know if you felt that. Maybe I just think that way,
No.
but
I
I was
think
like,
that I mean I
that,
think that like Walgreens is just like that one stop shop in today's world, kind of sort of. You can get it pretty
that's
much
true.
anything
Yeah,
there outside of a grocery store. So I think I mean I get the modern sentiment of that, but like I mean, come on, we could have went to any place else.
yeah,
We
and
did not think
it
about
just
this.
the scene fell very flat because they were like tasting the retinol cream and being like, "Are
Yeah.
these children?"
Which we know that's not possible. Like even if you're a
Yeah,
witch.
yeah. I was like, they now, and here's the thing: I thought that was totally unbelievable because they were like, "Are these the children?" They were acting so like ignorant of modern times when it's like, okay, if you came back in 1993 and you saw what
Right?
children look like because you were about to eat the little girl, you know what a child looks like. So you think
Exactly.
in 2022 you got less aware? So I'm like, so they were eating the mask and being like, it tastes like raspberries. And I was like, now I know you already know what children look like. The witches
Facts.
could have walked into Walgreens and been like, this is not where children are, and walked back out.
Facts.
That would have been much more authentic than them pretending to not know. I was like,
Even with the sliding doors, I was like, in 1990, there were sliding doors.
exactly. Yeah. I was
And I
like,
was just like, okay.
whoever wrote that, like, I just want to know who greenlit that. And I'm like, it's got to be somebody much more original around the Disney writers camp. Because who wrote that and greenlit it? There was nobody else who had another draft of Hocus Pocus 2. Because that's
Really
wild.
not.
Yeah, that the Walgreens scene, that's why I ended up taking it as a critique, because I was like, there's no way they're doing this for real.
They certainly will.
And then,
They
but
certainly will.
I think they did, because I was like, it was like you said, like I just feel like they were acting like the Sanderson sisters. That was the first time they had come out of the book. They had
Yeah.
we already know Hocus Pocus 1. They already came out in 1993. So why would there are certain things? Honestly, they should have quite a bit of knowledge about the real world, because they were fighting for their lives in the real world, were they not?
Actually, like before that, they had come out before, like in other times. So it's like I didn't understand it. I just didn't get how we got that. But
exactly, that was not the angle. That was not the angle, because it just looked so. It looked almost like a farce. It didn't. It wasn't funny.
Yeah, it didn't. It wasn't. I mean, it was just kind of like even. And I think also too for kids that are rewatching these things, when they do stuff like that, it's like you look dumb.
Yeah, exactly.
No offense, because it's like I know for a fact we're not, like Generation Z is not that dumb.
Exactly. No, then Generation Z is quite aware, and even younger generations, because they have access to the internet, which means they have access to originals.
Exactly.
Right? So, do you really think when a kid is looking at Hocus Pocus 1 versus 2, you think they're going to pick up Hocus Pocus 2 first before pick 1?
Facts.
They're going to go in order and then be like, this is 1. Okay, cool. Enjoyed 1. Look at 2 and be like, what is this? Just even if they have no idea what Hocus Pocus is about, if they pick it up for the first time and we go in logical order, 1, 2, they're still going to be like, 2 is really not hitting,
Facts. Or it's like a repeat. Like it literally is really a do-over. Let's be honest.
Yeah, it's almost like a total do-over, but not in it's not a celebratory way. It's just almost like, did we fool them to like, you know what I mean? It felt almost like they were trying to like trick you into not knowing what the original plot was.
I think they really they're probably banking on you not watching the original, because there's no fucking way.
Yeah,
there's just no way.
But who hasn't seen the original? Because they play the original so much in rotation every year. So I'm like, even little kids have probably seen the original. I would imagine, like even kids as young as 5, 6 years old, just born kids have probably seen the original, because they keep that stuff in rotation. It's a classic version.
I lost.
Exactly. It's like the Disney animated movies that come on. I mean, not Disney, but the Animagic, movies that come on every year. Those things came out in the 1970s, and I watch them every year, and have been watching them every year since I was like born, pretty much. Like it becomes a classic again because I just continue to watch the original, not because I'm watching the updated version.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say the movie was terrible, but I will say, Disney, we have got to stop doing this.
Be better. Please. I just think this is a problem of either the people greenlighting are not selecting the talent that's appropriate, or they don't have, quote, enough talent. I refuse to believe there's not enough talent out there, because I think they're just not looking in the right places or looking hard enough. So I think whoever is greenlighting is really okay with like. Honestly, I hate to say it. I just feel like whoever's greenlighting is probably someone who's like, well, they put iPhones in there, the kids will love it. And I'm like, no.
Seriously. I think also too, there's a culture of like. In the business world, there's a culture of like older people not leaving for new things to come in, and I think it's one of those kind of things. Like nobody, they're still trying to collect that check, so it's definitely not a younger individual that was like, "Let's this project." So it had to be someone older, probably the same people that have been on Lion King, Little Mermaid,
which is
redoing all these movies.
Yeah, it's like. They were probably around when those things actually did become classics in the 90s. Cool.
Well, sure.
We appreciate.
But I mean, you were to just redo the same thing. That's not clever.
Exactly.
So maybe bring someone in younger who can offer some great expertise
or
on what is relevant.
Go ahead. Yeah. But like and I agree with that. I totally agree. Either bring somebody in younger, or You can always evolve.
Yeah.
Listen or have some advisors who are around you who are younger and can say, this is probably not going to be fit what the current times are. This is not, you're not looking at this from this angle or whatever. Like, be adaptable and ready to look at yourself always. Because you did it in the 90s doesn't mean it's working in 2022. It's 30 years, almost 30 years later.
Facts. And like now we're the ones critiquing. So
yeah, and you're losing the interest because you're holding on to something so hard.
Yeah.
I think these movies, and you hate to say it, but they come out and be less than stellar. And it's just like, when we talk to our grandparents, our boomer, grandparents or whatever, who just refuse to see something. It's like, well, times are going on and we're just going to have to leave. We're going to have to, like, rather than deal with your toxicity as a family member, we're going to have to evolve. And if that means cutting you off, then that means cutting you off. And I think, unfortunately, this is showing. Yeah, that same like boomer mentality is showing up in the entertainment industry, and it's not giving.
Yeah. No, I'm not here for it. I can tell you that. And that's part of the reason why I don't really go to like the movies or anything like that, because I'm not going to like pay to go see these things. Exactly. When it's literally going to be a repeat. Exactly. I did go see Lion King and stuff like that just because like support. But I was like, that's a waste. That was pretty much the same thing here. Which I kind of knew that was just a live action, but it was not good. Like, I didn't think it was that good.
Yeah. I think it's really time. The era of messing with classics needs to stop at Disney and these other companies. Like,
yeah,
that was, you had a cute little 5-10 year period. Well, not even cute, but you had a period. And
it really wasn't giving to me, but
really giving, but like you had a time to do that and whatever. But I think it's really time to refocus on making feature-length films as interesting and original as television and series.
Yeah, exactly.
Series on Netflix and stuff, that stuff is original content. That stuff is where people are interested in.
And because it's original, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's because the writing is there to make it new, to make it interesting and make it something people want to see. But they're not doing that same thing with films. Like, films are just these big repeats over and over again. And franchises trying to resell this. And I'm like, you just got to ask, like, who is making the decision on this? Seriously. And I can't imagine it's anybody with like fresh ears, fresh eyes. You can't imagine it's them,
Yeah.
Like, we all have an image of who it is, and we know who it is. But what's crazy to me is like
Uncle Bob.
Yeah, Uncle Bob, who's, probably should have retired 5 years ago. But is not ready to give up the access that being in the industry gives to them,
As if the access goes away. Like, we're going to still know you, Betty. Relax.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, a lot of them are legends, classics in the industry, and that's cool, but you got to know when to step off stage, bud.
Yeah. Like, you are not making space for anything new and improved and original. Like,
exactly.
I feel like we're not going to get anything original until we're like freaking 45.
Exactly. I hate it. It's giving boomer. It's giving boomer. Like, they don't want to make space for new things to come in, which is ironic to me because I'm like, somebody had to make space for boomers to come in. And then they just sat there like very selfishly, just not trying to move, And I saw that the last company I was working with, they were, a bunch of boomers were like the heads of the company. And I'm like, they are running this shit into the ground with the decisions they're making. And it's because they just aren't letting somebody step in with who really has a pulse on the times. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It really is like an ego thing, if you ask me.
Exactly. And I'm like, and here's the thing. Behind your back, everybody is laughing at you. They know you're older. They know you're out of touch. They know you don't know.
Which I don't think they really care about. It's the money.
I guess so. But I'm like, if you own it, you own it. So you still get a check.
Facts. True.
But I would be all too happy, honestly. I hope that the company I start, the studio I start, is successful enough one day so I can pass it down to somebody who can keep it moving years, decades past me, like
at 50. So I can live my life. Exactly. Like, even before then, because it's like, yeah, there's so many things I want to do with life. Like, you don't want to do those too?
Exactly. Or, I mean, the other thing too is like, if you're an artist, you can keep going, you can keep making your work until you are dead, which is
Yeah.
great. So I can keep making work, but that doesn't mean I have to be the sole voice of the entire operation.
Yeah.
Like you can make space for other people to come in. That's what life is about, is like living your existence. You shine while you shine and pass the baton. That's what life is about. You don't sit and hold on to the baton. You can't win a race. It's literally like, those 400, or yeah, it's 400-meter, right? Where
Yeah.
they have to pass the baton. Now imagine
Mm-hmm.
you get to the third leg, and because this is what the boomers do, they just stand there, don't keep
Yep.
running or pass. It's like, come on now,
Come
that's
on.
what keeps it going, is passing the baton. And then you
Seriously.
lose. Everybody passes you because you just refuse to move. That's what it feels like. And
Seriously.
unfortunately, that's what it feels like. Hocus Pocus 2 feels like a product of that mentality of, I'm just going to hold on to the
100%.
baton.
Oh,
Like,
for
come
sure.
on, like Raj. It's always somebody named Roger or Rick.
Seriously.
Anyway, so yeah, but that turned into a little bit of a boomer rant. But I do feel like that's probably who's making these decisions.
Oh,
Them or
yeah.
some like older Gen Xer who fits the same mentality.
Who's 80s baby?
Yeah, 80s baby or 70s babies now.
Sure.
'Cause Gen X is like mom's generation, but they're
Mm-hmm.
getting into their 50s and 60s too. So nah, maybe I guess probably just 50s.
I don't know. But okay, so now we're gonna get on into Edward Scissorhands.
Yeah.
So once I watched it, I kind of like realized that I have seen some stuff from that before.
Mm,
But the movie was actually really good. I was I don't know why I was so surprised, but I was surprised.
it's good. I really,
So you wanna what happened?
I was saying it's really good. I had never seen it as well. For whatever
Uh-huh.
reason, I don't know why. It plays every year, but I never
Yeah.
sat down and watch it. As a kid,
Mm-hmm.
as an adult, until now. So, and we had both never seen it, which is also
Yeah.
rare. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that I've seen like clips of it on like TV and stuff like that because I remember seeing like the look of it once I watched it, but I never remember like what happened in the movie or anything like that. So,
exactly. No,
but yeah, so like give us a little like synopsis if you don't mind.
yeah. So, Edward Scissorhands is basically a film. There's so many angles you could take, but I'll take the broad angle. It's basically a film about a man, a boy, really, who's kind of a recluse, a shut in, because he was created by this like sort of mad scientist professor. So it's got a Frankenstein element to it, which is Edward.
Mm-hmm.
So Edward's like created by this mad scientist person, and they live in a very gothic style home. The scientist is sort of eccentric. He lives at the top of this hill, which is away from the town below surrounding him, right? Which is like a suburban town. But after this professor passes away, Edward ends up all alone living in this house. And then one day, one of the townspeople goes up to Edward's house trying to sell some makeup. She's an Avon lady, which I thought that was just such
That
a
is so
clever.
ironic. Like,
It's so yeah, it's so clever to put
mm-hmm.
that type of character in there. And but yeah, so she goes up to the house and is like, gonna sell some makeup, just very chipper. So she goes up but she discovers Edward all alone in this house, and she like takes him back to the town, and that's where all the drama unfolds. Yeah, that's kind of the premise, the like setup of the story, but because I don't want to give away like every plot detail, what happens in the end, but
Yeah.
that's the inciting incident. That's what gets it all kicked off.
Yeah.
And it's a classic, of course. But you know what? It's a classic because it's original. And it was original at the time. So,
Yeah, for sure. And granted, it is like a little play on like Frankenstein, like Courtney said. So there's that. But they have some really good things in this movie. So we're gonna get on into that.
Also,
So
I just want to say it's also a Tim Burton film, who is like the king of Halloween films. Like pretty much most of the classics you can think of, like Nightmare Before Christmas, and what's another one he did? I think he did another one with Johnny Depp in it. I think
Really?
it's
I
either
can see that.
Sleepy Hollow or
Johnny's a
Sleepy
good.
Hollow. Anyways, a lot of the Halloween classics Tim Burton directs, and I think it's for Disney, ironically enough. But go ahead, continue.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, Courtney said, so the Edward Scissorhand is played by Johnny Depp. Um, just, I know I don't know if that's a spoiler or not, but that means it's quality, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Love Johnny Depp. He's really good at playing different characters and really getting into those roles. Um, but so I guess we'll get into the formal qualities. Anything that like stood out to you about the formal qualities, Courtney?
Yeah. Also, the Winona Ryder is in there. She's also known to be in
Mm-hmm.
a lot of Halloween type films. Like she was in Beetlejuice as well.
Oh, really?
And yeah, she was in Beetlejuice. There's something else she was in that I feel was a Halloween movie. But anyways, she's another notable name in there, and I'm sure there's other notable names that we just are not mentioning. But just
Yeah,
so you know, so formal qualities. I think the biggest formal quality in this movie, which I'm so glad they really took the time to do this. Obviously, it was the '90s, so film was where the originality was happening in the '90s, pretty much. But they really played on set design, right?
mm-hmm.
So like you can clearly see there's immediately a difference between the way Edward's house looks and
Oh yeah.
then the way the town looks, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Edward's house, like I was even saying in the intro, is this Gothic style house, almost this Gothic style mansion, high up on a hill. It's totally black. The shutters are black. The like wood siding is black. You know, it's got these like black chimneys, and I forget what we call those things. The roof is black. Like it's just got this very decayed, dilapidated looking
Mm-hmm.
style of architecture that is obviously
And
referenced.
even like stylistically is like that, but even on the inside, it's literally the same. It's falling apart.
Yeah,
It's very like rugged. It's very like spider webby almost. So inside and out, this house looks exactly like that.
exactly. Yes. But then you contrast that with the suburban town, which is below the hill.
Mm-hmm.
And every single one of those houses looks exactly the same. It's
Mm-hmm.
pastel homes. It's like they got three color choices, which was like pastel blue, pastel pink, pastel peach, and purple. And they all just choose various,
Yeah.
colors to put their homes. They all have the same, they drive the same cars, which are also pastel. Everyone looks, their clothing choices are roughly the same. Inside their homes is very like starter home, low
Yeah.
ceilings, sort
The
of like
same.
that cookie cutter. You got a
Yeah.
living room, a dining room, kitchen, and two bedrooms. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
very like just what a cookie cutter suburban home looks like. That's what the town looks like. And it's got that kind of when you look at suburbs or neighborhoods from an aerial view, all the houses are just kind of like dot the streets. So it's like dot dot
Yeah.
dot dot dot. You know what I mean? Um, and they really played on that look, and I think that just speaks volumes to what the narrative is saying. You got this outsider, and you got the group, which is the insider, and so it
Yeah.
sets up immediately that tension with just the way their homes look, the set looks.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah. And it also sets up this idea. It's almost like 80s parody, right? It's like it
Yeah.
feels very like slightly exaggerated. It's like not really believable that these people would live in this sort of
For sure.
extreme cookie cutter style. Like it's just there's such an idea of sameness in the town. It's like everybody's the same. Everybody
Oh
like
yeah.
looks the same, does the same activities. They go to the same job. You know what I mean? Like there's and they're very much playing on that idea, but as a way to critique it. And I think that
Yeah.
comes across very clearly as like, it's almost sickening. It's like, oh, they're all the same, gross, you
Yeah.
know?
It's very giving. It's like giving. I mean, it's just giving very like. I don't know how to like put this, but it's giving like I don't know how to put this without being like starting a whole nother conversation on race. But it's kind of like race. You know what I mean? You have your individuals who are superior than anyone else, kind of thing, and they have these standard things that you should want and desire, and everybody else is just like you can't penetrate our norm.
Yeah, it's very
So
much.
it's like that.
Yeah, they set it up very immediately with us versus them, the
Oh
other.
yeah,
You know, Edward is the other, which,
for
like
sure.
I was saying, you could substitute that for like racial minorities or even sometimes gender minorities or just the people who are not in the same class as the norm, which I think
Hmm.
is ironic because they use the things like the set design and the overly pastel or even like the kind of like overly done makeup to make you really sick of the norm. Like you look at the norm and you're like, that's not even an appealing norm,
Yeah,
and I think that's a really smart move because it's subtle and they never make the film about a critique, but you see it is
oh for
there,
sure. Yeah,
you
and I
know?
think it also makes like because you see everything else is the same and everybody is the same and everybody is just like, it makes you appeal to Edward even though he looks
Yeah.
different or he's experienced life differently. It I mean, it makes him appealing because he's different. He's the oddball in the room, kind of, sort of. So,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I think that's another tool too. It does pull you towards Edward because he is the other. But you start to like
hmm
have more compassion for him off rip
yeah,
because he he refuses even just I mean, he doesn't know it, but he's refusing to sort of submit,
yeah.
you know?
The thing is, I don't think he was refusing. Honestly didn't know. But when he got there, he wanted to fit in.
On some level, yeah.
So,
Yeah. Which this to me is a bigger conversation because like in American culture there's really two opposing forces. There's the emphasis on being an individual, and then
hmm
also being an individual
being the
in
same.
the society, in the sameness of society, right? As like
Yeah,
we prize being an individual and standing out and doing you,
in
whatever,
certain
right? But
aspects.
also you got to fit in. Don't stray
Yeah,
too far from what the standard is. You know what I mean? So I think this really clearly shows that tension. You know what I
for
mean?
sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think especially during like when this movie was made, I think in the 90s, that would have been something huge, like they were coming from an era of everything was the same. And
Yeah.
so this idea of something different, someone different, looking different, experiencing life different, it was like, what?
Hmm.
So you do have to take into context when this movie was made because it definitely was kind of like a play on that time.
Oh yeah, that's why I wrote down, my notes. I was like, this feels very much like an almost like an 80s parody because in
Yeah.
the 80s and 90s, but really stronger in the 80s, I think there was like mass consumer culture, right? At that time.
hmm
That's when it's like everybody that's when people could afford to everybody's moving to the suburbs. Everybody gets the same car. Everybody gets, is investing in this idea of like American capitalism, but also American sameness. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I
hmm
think that's, because that's when it becomes like everybody has this certain kind of TV and everybody watches MTV or everybody you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like everybody
hmm
has the same cultural experiences
Wants,
collectively.
experiences.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think that was when it was like high time for that.
hmm
Um, and so it feels like they are really trying to make a parody of that and show that in the townspeople, even with the way their hair looks.
Yeah.
Um, their hair has this sort of like, exaggerated fluffy style. I guess you could say like
Yep.
the 1960s, the 1950s and 60s
hmm
like that too. Um, but for some reason, I don't know. I see the 80s as an exacerbation of that. That's like that 30-year time period between the 50s and 60s is when it's like everybody's got to look the same. Everybody's got
For
to live in the
sure.
suburbs. Everybody's got to have a station wagon. Everybody's daughter is a cheerleader and the son plays football. It became like those classic American, like all American is when I think
hmm
that idea of developed, and
True.
Edward obviously is not all American. So
By far.
by far, yeah.
So, all right. So let's get into. I guess we're kind of like hitting on some themes now.
Mhm.
Um, what else? Let's see. I think also too there was like a huge theme of like exploitation.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm going to use you for everything you possibly can give me.
Mhm.
Um, in this, and even though you're coming to my world, which is quote unquote normal, what you should want or whatever, since you are different, let me exploit you, and then I'm just gonna throw you back out to the wolves. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, definitely that, and that's what I think is strongest about this is like under the perfect pastel image of that town, the town was much darker and much more sinister than Edward ever
Then
was.
exactly, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Edward was totally preyed upon and totally like innocent almost. And
Mm-hmm.
that is, but the townspeople is what's sinister and dark.
Yeah. For
Despite
sure. And that could be the play on the colors too. Even though Edward's house was like dark and black and gothic or whatever, he was the sweetest one, willing to help any and everybody at the expense of
his own self.
his self, really. Yeah. Um, and even like the girl that he liked, right? He was willing to risk that in order to benefit everybody, even her. And
Yeah.
so then you have the town people who just wanted to take everything he has for him. So those pastel colors are supposed to be fun and vibrant and likable and all those good things like that. And they really weren't those type of people at all. Edward did not like it down there at some point.
Mhm.
So, that could be a play on the colors.
I definitely think that was part of it, is like what we think is the standard is much
Mm-hmm.
darker than the outsider. Like they paint the other as
Yeah.
this issue, like,
Mm-hmm.
and that's so true for that has been something that people talk about the test of time is like it's always the other who is like outcast or the problem or whatever, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, they became the other because the norm pushed them out, which is not a very
Yeah.
kind thing to do, right? Or it's not very
Mm-hmm.
accepting of you, despite you thinking you're this, you're the more evolved or the more, enlightened or kind, generous one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I wrote this down too. Is basically another theme that we've kind of been talking about is suburbia as a cult of personality. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So the suburbs itself is a basically like this like cult of personality. So everybody subscribes to the same type of personality, meaning they have the same type of home, they have the same type of car, they have the same type of jobs, they live the same type of lifestyle, and they adopt the same mannerisms, behaviors in order to like almost like a cult is like to live and exist in the suburbs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody has to fit in to be like accepted almost.
Yeah, it's like they eat the same meals, wake up the same time, do the same,
Mm-hmm.
have the same predictable
Yeah.
lifestyle. Like it's like the idea that we equate the suburbs and sameness as somehow comfortable, but that's
Mm-hmm.
where the darkness and the sinister and the really sadistic personalities come out, because some of the people in there are sort of sociopathic.
Yeah.
Some of the like
Yeah.
people there, and we'll get into those conversations. But some of the characters are like not. They should be the ones locked away.
Seriously. Yeah. Joyce.
Yeah.
Joyce.
Oh, definitely Joyce. Yeah. Um. Which, speaking of, you know what? Let's go ahead and get into this topic too, because Joyce is a good segue into that. I think
Mm-hmm.
something they play on, and it's sort of slight, but it's there. The undertone of like the repressed suburban woman whose
Mm-hmm.
sexuality is repressed, but also her like desire for new experiences is repressed. It's kind of like, and we've seen it that archetype play out over again. It's like the repressed housewife. Like the housewife
Mm.
doesn't get to get out
Yeah.
and have experiences or whatever because she's so like concerned with maintaining that home and that image.
Yeah. And the monotony of it too.
And the monotony of it, yeah. And so, but we see that with Joyce. I mean, she's trying to come
Mm-hmm.
on to every male she pretty much comes into contact with. Like
Yeah.
even early, there's a scene where she's got like the guy fixing her like dishwasher. She's trying to
Yep.
come on to him, and then Edward. As soon as she sees Edward, she's trying to come on to him. So
Mm-hmm.
she's got a predatory personality
For
behavior
sure.
for sure.
And then when
And
he doesn't do what she wants him to do, and then it's like she's after him.
yeah,
Um,
she lies and creates this whole like rumor about him.
yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which I think is ironic they did that in a woman, because normally we associate that behavior with men who like don't
Yeah,
receive the sexual gratification that they want, then they
true.
retaliate. But seeing that in a woman is really interesting because you almost you almost forgive it more in a weird way. You know what I mean?
Oh, I didn't, but I could see
I
that.
mean, well, I think looking at it, it's like, oh, well, people already associate like sexual assault as like a male thing. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like with Joyce, they're like, well, they forgive it in the sense that she's like, oh, she's probably just frustrated, or she's probably like,
Yeah, or like her
you know,
husband's not there,
her
or
husband's
which
not.
everybody, all the women that were in the society are like, oh, that's just Joy. It's like that's just how she is, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Excusing that behavior, but very problematic. And even Edward was just kind of like taken aback by it. So
yeah,
it was good to see the reverse of that. I will absolutely agree, because I think during this was before like the B2 culture too.
mm,
It's reassuring that women are also predators, and
yeah,
can be uh, vindictive in not getting their own gratification.
exactly, yeah, and yeah, I find the scene that I think is so funny, and they like honestly, this is hilarious when Edward starts cutting everybody's hair and giving them like unique
Oh
looks,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
She's sitting there. She's like all literally she's like almost going into like orgasm from this guy from him cutting her hair because she's like
yeah,
she's made it clear she's desiring him, you
yeah.
know, as more than just a hair cutter by that
hmm
point.
I
So
think also too that she was also very enlightened and intrigued by the experience of being an individual. I think
yeah.
Joyce was like borderline not norm, but she was just like borderline. Like she didn't know if she was, very eccentric in some ways and different from like the normal society,
Hmm.
and down in the town.
Well, she's not
But
married, so that's part of it, I think.
I think she was. She just said he was away.
Oh, okay.
Well, either way, her husband was there or not there, whether she was married or not married. But she didn't have a male in her home, during the movie. But
Hmm.
nonetheless, she was very just like matter of fact in like pursuing that guy that was fixing her dishwasher, which most
Hmm.
of the other women would not probably have done anything like that. So she was like
Hmm.
teetering the line of not fitting into the norm, kind of being like an outcast, kind of like Edward. But
Hmm.
seeing Edward, I think, was liberating in a way, because it's like, oh wait, I kind of want to be that too. But also, the getting the haircut was like another step towards that. She didn't have a haircut like anybody else.
Hmm. I thought, something else I thought was interesting about the haircuts is like I felt like the haircuts they were getting made them look more ethnic. Like they were giving me like almost like the haircuts black women would be wearing because one of them had like an
Hmm.
asymmetrical haircut, which was popular
Yeah, that little
at
side
the time
bob.
for like like salt and pepper haircut. A couple of them had that haircut, and I was like, that's so
hmm
interesting that they like the hairstyles they chose to make them look unique were also just referencing black women, black culture, which would have been, I mean, when this came out, Salt and Pepper was hot-ish at the time.
Oh yeah,
So like that would have been very much in the, you know, the
the
their
wheelhouse for
aesthetic,
sure.
their psyche, yeah, as like what ethnic or different looks like. So I
Yeah,
thought
yeah, yeah.
it was very subtle undertone, but it was interesting the styles that they chose to go with to make them look interesting or
hmm
you know,
For sure.
yeah. And then, also, it's important to note Edward was transforming everybody's hair in the town. So, like, it started out with Joyce, then he cut uh, Kim's mom's hair. I forget what her name is, but that's the
hmm
family he was staying with. He was staying with Kim's mom's family,
And then
and
some of basically Kim's friends,
yeah,
which they
the
all
other
were.
ladies in the town, like he was cutting all of their hair and giving them these like unique looks, which is really the turning point for him when they started to accept him. Is like they're like, oh, you can give us, you can break us away from sameness. You can make us look like different people, by cutting our hair. So I think, again, that kind of goes back to that exploitation. Like, they definitely were using him to sort of make him work for them. You know what I mean? Like,
hmm
so, which is, I think that's an interesting point too, of like how, you got the normal society and then you have the other, but they're okay with the other as long as the other is serving some sort of purpose directly for
hmm
them. But when the other is an individual and is really standing on their own and saying, like, I won't be used this way, that's when they have a problem. Like you were saying
Yeah, for
earlier.
sure.
Like, so yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think so you want to get into some of the characters?
Sure. So I guess we'll start out with we kind of hit on these two. But Edward, he's the main male character, which he's kind of like um, he's just a male, very like dark gothic. Um, doesn't want to pretty much doesn't want to like step on anyone's toes. Kind of like gentle giant, pretty likable. And he's like really willing to do any and everything to pretty much please anyone. So
Yeah.
be liked and be part of a family and just have that type of um, like relationship, I guess you can say. What else? Who else is there?
I thought it was interesting. Most of the male characters actually were in the background. Like
Very
the
true.
main tension in the story comes between Edward as a central male character, and then we have the other women characters, which is form this collective town.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Kim's boyfriend, who's sort of a sadist. He is a sadist. He ain't sort of. He is a
Yeah,
sadist.
he was a
Um,
pain.
yeah, but those are really the only. Most of the other men in the town really fade into the background. Like Kim's a dad,
Yeah.
the other
Mm-hmm.
husbands and stuff.
For sure. And they're like yes men.
Oh yeah, they're definitely
They
yes
just
men.
kind of like do whatever wife tells them to do, which
Hmm.
is during that time back in the day, that was not the norm.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think it's interesting that they chose to really pair Edward with like this group of kind of angsty women
mm-hmm.
versus having him confront men. Like his main adversaries were all women, right?
Yeah,
Besides the boyfriend at the end. Um, so I think that's really interesting that because I guess in suburbia, women are sort of the other too. Like women are always inferior in a patriarchy.
mm-hmm.
So, or at least seen as inferior, not actually inferior. But so it's just interesting. He chose to really. The story is not about the men in so many ways. Like the men don't
Mm-hmm.
change. The men don't seek Edward's attention. They don't even seek his downfall. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So that was an interesting choice.
for
But I
sure.
think I think it works. Because there's also this idea that women tend to be more accepting of new characters versus men.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then even having Edward go in and cut their hair, that was one way that they could be accepting of him. Because it's like, oh, it's almost like, I hate to say it, but like, you know how women are more accepting of like a gay best friend? It almost felt like that. Almost felt
For
like,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, there's this new guy in town that we're like all obsessed with. And because he does our hair or he like contributes to us, our femininity in somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, very true.
yeah, which we can talk about the problematics of the gay best friend thing too, because I think that's also problematic. But
Yeah.
yeah, but that's kind of, you know, that might be why they chose to go with women versus a male dominated, sort of thing.
Yeah, highly possible. Highly possible.
So, but yeah, so some of the tropes I think that came in here, is definitely the trope of like this gentle, naive, reclusive quote monster, Edward, um, who ends up being scapegoated and taken advantage of, right? So like the
Mm-hmm.
naive monster dates back to Frankenstein. Actually, is like if you read the story of Frankenstein, he's like this blank state. So when he goes around hurting people, he doesn't really like realize he's hurting people because he has no cognitive no like morality. You know what I mean? He's almost like this blank slate, like almost like a child. So
Mm-hmm.
when he does hurt people, it's this unintentional way of he's just moving through life and doesn't understand his body and his size and that he's a monster.
Yeah.
So I think that is what they definitely play on that. It's sort of an undertone, but they play on that. What do you
Mm-hmm.
think?
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. 100%.
Yeah, and something that goes along with that is like the naive monster who's not really seen as a person, and so
Mm-hmm.
they're easier to take advantage of, you know. So they're not seen as they're seeing someone without a past or a context for their own life. And Edward is vulnerable to that. And so the community, like we see with somebody like Joyce, they come in and kind of impress upon them, you know?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, Joyce was heavy into that. I will
Exactly.
say that Kim and her family, I think they did very good. They were like pretty open to the
Mhm.
idea and definitely more genuine out of pretty much the entire community. Um, so I'm glad he like went to them and not like Joyce got her hands on him first.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, because Joyce was definitely predatory. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I agree. I think Kim's family was the best place for him to be because they accepted him, like, for who and what he was.
Mm-hmm.
And even once later, when Edward got into trouble or was getting into trouble, they were like trying to make sure that trying to clear his name. You know,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was saying something earlier about oh, you can really actually, this probably goes a little bit deeper, but you can almost think of the townspeople the same way you think about that professor who originally made Edward, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
if Edward is so recluse and shut in that he has no concept of the real world, he has no concept of his own life, no concept of himself as pretty much a person. Once he gets to the town almost becomes like the professor. Like they're imparting their lifestyle on him. They're giving him, experiences. They're giving him a context for life. The
Mm-hmm.
same way the professor was giving, Edward his body, but also teaching him. Like we see that scene where he's teaching him etiquette.
Mm-hmm.
So they almost it's like the professor sees him almost as this like human toy, but the town sees him as a
Yeah.
human toy. Both of
Pretty
them.
much. Yeah.
Toy
Yeah.
to both of them.
Yeah. And he just wants to be seen as like a human, you know?
Mm-hmm.
He like so bad. He just wants to be seen as a normal, whatever normal is, but he just wants to be seen as like a person. He
Mm-hmm.
wants to be liked. He wants to be like desired to be around and hang out with
Mm-hmm.
in many capacities. And for some reason, he just can't get that. So he goes by the end of the movie, he just goes back to his home that's gothic, quote unquote, the undesirable place, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
that's the only place of like solace for him,
And safety.
peace
Yeah.
and safety and stuff like that. And he just stays up there.
Exactly. It's ironic that like what we think of as safety in the suburbs
Mm-hmm.
or like goodness in the suburbs is actually the most dangerous place for someone like an individual like Edward to be. He's much
Yeah,
safer. Literally at the end, he's cutting ice sculptures and making it snow on the town. That is the safest place that he could be,
for sure.
is away from them, pretty much. Which I think that's just so true for like, life and the way our society is set up is like, I'm thinking about the Great Recession, not recession, the Great Resignation now, where everybody's just like quitting these corporate jobs. It's like, it's much easier for me to be at home in my own space, in my own lane, cutting my own ice sculpture than it is for me to conform to this social standard sitting in an office, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what some people are having a hard time wrapping their mind around is like, y'all are the monsters.
Seriously.
you know?
Seriously.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think this is interesting that so many years later, obviously, that, this still rings very true, and that's how
Mm-hmm.
it's a good, solid film because these are universal themes that carry from generation to generation to generation.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
overall, what did you think? What was like your favorite scene or like your main key scene, I guess?
I mean, really, I like so much of it, but I guess I like the scene where he's cutting the ice sculpture for the first time, and Kim's kind of like dancing in um the snowflakes that he makes.
Mm-hmm.
I like that scene because so much has happened at that point. It's like towards the end of the movie, and Edward is like, there's like a manhunt out for Edward, but he still like finds a way to use his hands, his scissor hands, to make something beautiful and kind of like relish in that moment with Kim, even though he's basically
Yeah,
not done.
you're true.
You
You had a
know,
little crush on Kim.
yeah, I think that was a really beautiful moment to put in there. Um, and that's when that's when the boyfriend obviously barges in and starts all kinds of drama. Leave it to a dude to f up the situation. Anyways, but yeah, so he came in, barged in, and then pretty much started after Edward. But before that, him and Kim had a beautiful moment. You know,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, her boyfriend was just a mess, to say the least.
he was really sadistic, honestly.
Yeah.
he ends up dead at the end. Spoiler: I think he's dead by the end. Is he not?
Was he? I don't remember him being dead.
I think he went
I
up
know
to
he
the
got
castle.
stabbed.
Yeah, but did he not die?
I don't remember. I mean, they don't really show what happened next, but
I assumed he died because he went up to Edward's house and killed and was like fighting with Edward, and Edward was like, I feel like Edward was trying to hold back in that fight. Edward was like, I
oh
really
yeah.
take you out right now, but I'm not going to, because Edward was like pretty much save them from themselves kind of thing. Because he
Yeah.
doesn't know,
And
like,
he really didn't want to hurt anybody. That I don't feel like that was ever his intent.
yeah, I don't think he ever wanted to hurt anybody because he knew he could if he wanted to.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he got sharp, pointy objects on all 10 of his extremities, so he definitely could hurt anybody at any point in time. Which is
Seriously.
that's interesting because I'm like, he really could have hurt any of the townspeople at any point in time during the entire film.
Seriously.
Didn't
Seriously.
have to just be that moment. So like, it took a lot of restraint. It took a lot of character. It took a lot of will as an individual, which they seem to not have, the townspeople, for him to not hurt anybody. Like, he had to be very delicate.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't he had to hug people a certain way. He had to, help people a certain way to make sure his hands didn't stab anybody. Like, a very kind thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be interesting to see Edward Scissorhands, the film, from Edward's perspective, because I feel like
Yeah.
most of the time we're looking from a third party or the community's perspective. But like, to see the steps Edward has to take to not hurt them, you know,
Uh-huh.
Because he could have hurt the people. But yeah, what's your favorite part?
Um, I think when he goes back to his home, that was probably my favorite part, just
Mm-hmm.
because he was like, he then understood that, like, you know what? I don't need to conform. I can just be me and I can be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he could really like express himself how he wanted to there. He had learned some things that he enjoyed and stuff like that. So he was able to take that back to his home and make his home, nice and cool and likable, I guess. Like, he was cutting the little hedges and stuff like that into different animals and whatnot, which he had done in the town. So yeah, I think that was my favorite scene. Just him being okay, I guess. But you know what? That the boyfriend definitely did die. He was pushed out. You're right.
Yeah, yeah, he
Yeah,
died. That's what I'm saying.
which he
I
should
think,
have. He was a villain.
yeah. Honestly, I think they should have had a moment of like Joyce getting, or Edward getting a lit back against Joyce, because
Yeah.
that was the only character I felt like I didn't rest well with her being problematic. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, he never got his revenge on her, which he should have.
Exactly. Because I'm like, Joyce is just gonna do this again.
Oh, 100%.
Literally. And the way she started that rumor too, to try to like shift blame from herself, like she has done this before.
Yep.
She knew exactly what to do, and she just went right into crisis mode.
Right.
And I was like,
it was like white girl tears for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely white girl tears. But the thing is, she weaponized white girl tears, and I'm kind of glad they showed that in the movie. They like showed her intention, or they showed her real character, because that's so true. Like she was straight up trying to come on to Edward,
for sure.
And then tried to cry about it later.
Right? Yeah. As if she did nothing wrong.
Exactly.
And all because he didn't want her, like, ma'am.
Right?
Ma'am.
And the thing is, she knew the power of shaping the community's perspective against him. She knew she couldn't do it alone. So she knew her weapon was shaping other people's perspective of this person, which is what we see with Karens all the time. They don't just try to handle the situation by themselves. They call the cops. Right?
They cry as soon as they're usually the one that's victimizing someone else until the cop shows up, and then they're like crying these white woman tears.
Exactly, because they know that their own real power is being able to, I don't want to say instigate, but incite other people to act. They don't actually have to act themselves; they just incite other people through emotional manipulation, basically.
Yeah,
and that's exactly what Joyce did. White woman tears. If you don't know, which people pretend to act like they don't know what white women tears are, I think people know, because
look it up.
Yeah, like, and the thing is, Tim Burton's a white filmmaker, and he noted that very clearly. So it's not that y'all don't know, y'all know, But yeah, that's just interesting. And it's so interesting how all these themes are connected to things we talk about now all the time, right? With like the Karen movement and all of that, and weaponized tears. Because for Joyce, that was her only weapon. I mean, she tried to use sexual gratification as a weapon, but that didn't work for a certain person, or it didn't work for anybody really. And so she resorted to what she could rely on: tears.
Yeah.
So
I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I guess Edward wins at the end of the day because he's not around them, but it just goes to show that the community has the power to shape how the outsider is seen. So it's the community who holds the power of the grand narrative about the outsider, but also themselves. It's not the individual who can shape. The individual does not have the power to shape a narrative. It only comes in numbers.
Yeah.
Which when you can talk about that in depth, but yeah.
Well, yeah, so that's our episode, or our rewind episode for Halloween, where we discussed a little bit about our views on Hocus Pocus versus Hocus Pocus 2. And we discussed Edward Scissorhands. Definitely a really, really, really good movie to watch. Edward Scissorhands specifically, and Hocus Pocus. Maybe not Hocus Pocus 2, but definitely go check those out. Do you have any other like Halloween recommendations?
For films? Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think some of just the cutesy kiddie classics are great. Like, I like A Nightmare Before Christmas. I watch it at least once every year. I think that I started watching, I like The Addams Family. The cartoon one, the new one that came out in 2019, which is a shocker because I know there's original Addams Family from the 90s. That one's cool too, but they actually did a good job updating the episodes, or not the episodes, excuse me, updating that narrative for children these days. So, yeah, I definitely think that I like that movie. I watched the Looney Tunes the other day, which was good. And that was interesting. Cutesy little things. Because we didn't watch that really growing up. It was kind of before our time. Let's see, what else do I like? I feel like there's so many horror films now, and I don't like horror films like that. So I have to end up watching like sort of the family friendly movies. Um, and I'm actually trying to go back and watch like the more obscure movies. So the other day I watched what is it called? I don't even remember it. It was like a Teen Wolf movie from the 80s. And
You forgot to mention Hocus Pocus. Not Hocus Pocus. Haunted Mansion. That's a good one.
oh, Haunted Mansion's good. Yes. I was sitting here, I was
Um,
thinking about I was talking about how I don't really watch horror movies. Like most of the movies I watch are like family friendly because
yeah,
I don't need to be jump scared on Halloween. Sorry. I
yeah.
go to
Seriously,
the festival in
yeah.
the
Like
box.
those little Halloween movies. Not a huge fan of. I don't think those are even believable. So
Yeah, I don't like the horror ones like that.
yeah, I think another good one too to watch is it's an older one, but Practical Magic, a good movie. It's
Yeah,
not necessarily, I don't think it's like Halloween specific, but it is, it just has some like magical things, elements in there. There is like a little scene that kind of like gets you, makes scary a little bit, but
yeah.
nothing too major, but really good movie, really good movie.
I
Sandra
think
Bullock's in it.
I think 90s Halloween movies take the cake.
Yeah, for sure. They weren't like Halloween, like those types of things. Those were like,
Just good narrative films,
yeah.
and pumpkins added to it. Like they
Mm-hmm.
also made it a solid story first, and then added the Halloween dress.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah. But it's more
that's
like it's more like just makes you think what
yeah,
is possible versus it just legit just scaring you or being like gory. Like I don't like the gore.
yeah.
That's
Now I
not
feel like
to me. That's not scary.
exactly. Oh, you know what else? I forgot this. This is a family movie. Um, I think Beetlejuice is a good one to watch. That's also from the 90s. And then Corpse Bride is good, but Little Shop of Horrors, those are musicals. Little Shop of
Mm,
Horrors is a good one, and Rocky Horror Picture Show, both from the 80s and 70s, I believe, respectively. And but those are fun. Like they're like offbeat narratives that
mm-hmm,
give you that little creepiness, or it's got this kind of like odd, aesthetic to it that I
mm-hmm.
think makes it kind of I just feel like back in the day they went for creepy, less like gore, killing, and death. You know.
Yeah, I'm trying to like what other movies though.
Those are ones I enjoy, but I would watch those like in the middle of the summer too. So yeah, you know, Sleepy Hollow is a pretty good one too. I'm like going through the list of ones I'm seeing.
Hmm,
You can always watch Alfred Hitchcock movies, but those are sort of
I don't even know
just
who that is.
you know who Alfred Hitchcock is?
No, should I
Psycho.
know?
Yeah, he broke like one of the most famous like thriller filmmakers ever. Psycho? Heard of Psycho?
Mm,
Psycho, Vertigo, The Birds. I'm trying to think of the movies. Really, really famous film director. Like literally anybody who goes to film school, even if you take a film class, you're gonna learn about Alfred Hitchcock. Alfred Hitchcock.
mm-hmm,
He's from like the 1950s.
hmm.
Um,
Well, maybe I'll look up something he's made.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
Those are
that's our recommendations too. Also, I don't know if I've seen this movie, but I've heard about it quite a bit. But Sleepy Hollow, probably should
yeah.
watch that.
That's just Sleepy Hollow too. That's good.
Oh,
I have
you've seen
Johnny
it?
Depp. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Johnny. I probably watched that today.
Good. I think I'm gonna rewatch Beetlejuice at some point because I haven't watched it in a while.
I've never seen that
And
either.
um yeah, that was like in the same category as Edward Scissorhands for me. Something I had never seen but definitely knew to
Mm,
watch consistently.
hmm.
And I want to
Okay,
say
yeah, I'll
Beetlejuice
probably
is
watch that.
almost musical. I don't know if it's a musical totally, but
Hmm.
it's something like that. But yeah, those are our other film recommendations, since we won't be able to obviously review every single film, every Halloween film that we could think of. So,
well, that is our episode on Halloween classics, specifically movies. But yeah, thanks for watching. We hope to see you guys in the next one.
Yeah, we hope you watch some of the films we recommended before Halloween.
Yeah, do that.
Over. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one.
Bye.